May I have your attention, please? May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is son of Yisrayl Hawkins. I'd like to serve you as a priest very soon. Let's start finding seats for Sabbath services.
May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is son of Yisrayl Hawkins, and I'd like to be forever as priest starting very soon. It's a purpose and honor to present to you the sons and daughters of Yisrael now entering the sanctuary. I'd like to the son of Yisrael, Benjamin Alexander Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. The title of my speech is, We Are All the House of Yahweh. The house of Yahweh teaches true peace, joy, and love. We must stay in the house of Yahweh, not the house of the gods. We are the people of Yahweh. The 11th book of Yisrayl, part 2, chapter 5, verse 41. And it says, But he who overcomes will inherit all things, and I'll be his father, and he will be my son. He who overcomes, which means it's possible. See, this shows you it's possible to do so. We are the house of Yahweh, and we can overcome all evil. That's a fact. Praise Yahweh. The house of Yahweh is built with people. The house of Yahweh is the best place on earth, and there is no other. The house of Yahweh feeds you clean drinks and feed you clean food and clean drinks against the wickedness. Feed you clean foods and clean drinks. The house of Yahweh offers you protection against the wicked, shelter and protection against the wickedness of this world. For my first scripture, please turn to Isaiah 2:2. And it says, But it will come to pass in the last days that the mountain of promotion of the house of Yahweh will be established in the chief of the nations, and it will be raised over all congregations, and all nations will eventually flow to it. For my second scripture, please turn to Micaiah 4:1. And it says, But in the last days it will come to pass that the mountain of promotion of the house of Yahweh will be established in the chief of the nations, and will be raised above all congregations. It will be raised above all congregations, and all peoples will eventually flow to it. The house of Yahweh teaches righteousness to the people. Yahweh has established his house again in these last days because he has a job for us to do. The job Yahweh wants us to do is to rule like him. Please turn to Genesis 1:26. And it says, And Yahweh said, I will make man in my image according to my likeness, and they will have rulership over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth. This means we must become like our Father Yahweh, perfect in righteousness, keeping his 613 laws, and we will be given rulership over all. Please turn to TTF 5, verse 48. And it says, "You must become perfect just as your Father who is in heaven is perfect." We must overcome all brethren. We are his family, the house of Yahweh, the only place that has true peace and rejoicing for all. May Yahweh bless your understanding, and now I turn to the next speaker.
Shabbat Shalom once again, brothers and sisters. Yahweh's got an awesome program lined up for us today on this very special day. So at this time, we'll turn the services over to the great deacon, David Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. What an awesome day. In Numbers chapter 29, verse 1, it says, "On the first day of the 7th moon, you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no regular customary work. It is a day for you to sound the trumpets," the Feast of Trumpets. And we're here to celebrate this last work, this seventh work, the work of the seventh Malak, the seventh trumpeter in these last days. And we're all part of this work, and we're helping to celebrate this work today. We have a great lineup for you today, beginning with a young man from Abilene who wanted to he knew this was the only place he could find true peace, and he's been here all his life, and that's Deacon Yisrayl Hawkins. Then we have Deacon Caleb Hawkins. He's been in the house of Yahweh all his life and is very involved in many aspects of the work. You can see him running around here, just involved in everything, celebrating this work. Then we have Deacon Samuel Hawkins. He's from Fort Worth, and he's been in the house of Yahweh since 2006, so right at 12 years. And somebody told him about the name of Yahweh way back when. They told him about the name of Yahweh. They wrote it on a piece of paper and handed it to him, and he kind of lost track of the guy. He'll tell you a little bit more about that. Then we have the great doctor of music, Deacon Michael Ossoff Hawkins, and he's been here for 21 years learning the peaceful solution, and he's from Nebraska. Then we have Deacon Anthea Hawkins, who's been here 30 years. That's a long time, and he's been hanging in there doing the work, very involved in many aspects of the work, and you can see him up there with his chef hat on, I guess, at Abel's kitchen, hard at work. Then we have the priest, Kohan Shimon Hawkins. He's been here for 22 years, and he's from New York and has been here learning the peaceful solution all this time. We have Kohan Kananya Hawkins. He's been in the house of Yahweh for 26 years learning the peaceful way of life, and he's from Ohio. Then to finish up, we have Kohan Yeshua Hawkins from North Carolina. He was baptized when he was 17 years old, and he started on a path of learning the peaceful solution. And, of course, he's done a very great job of it, and he's involved in many aspects of the work. And we look forward to hearing from all these men today in them helping to celebrate this seventh work. If you'll all please stand. I'd like to present to you our first speaker. Deacon Yisrayl Hawkins.
May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. So, we've been right now in these last days, we're fulfilling the prophecies and the things in this 7 work that are talked about in the scriptures over and over and over. But every day, every week, every month, there's something that takes us away from the work that we're doing, whether it be tests and trials, somebody stepping on our toes, just anything that comes across that tries to throw us off from the work that we're doing. So today I would like to try to place some scriptures in our minds that we all already know, but just to stick them right there. That way you can, months down from now, you can understand that and kind of get an understanding of, well, this person's doing this to me right now. What am I going to do? Am I going to lose all my self-control, everything I've worked for the last 10 years, and just throw it all away and say, I'm out of here? Is that what we're going to do? Okay, well then we got to learn how to control our emotions, The biggest thing that takes place with us is the emotions that run through us, It's not necessarily just somebody just stepping on our toes. We can handle that. It's our mind that says, no, he just stepped on our toes. We have to act out on that. We have to throw everything away. We have to throw all of the peaceful solution that we've been taught, all of the laws that tell us and learn and teach us how to overcome that. So today, so just sticking on the pattern that is going to help us stay in Yahweh's house. Once we get our mind off focus and we decide, that pattern isn't important anymore, and we just throw that away, that's when we start letting sin build up inside of us. And you can just walk by somebody and immediately tell when they have bitterness build up inside of them. Years and years and years of somebody just decided to stop on their toes one day, and they've just been letting it build up and build up and build up. They didn't go confess for what they said to the person or anything. They just let it keep on building and building and building until finally it's just like a big bomb and it just burst. And within a week they're out of here. People that have been here for 20, 30 years. It takes place every so often because people just let this bitterness build up inside of them. So, most of the time it's always sin. It's sin that gets our mind off of it. Entertainments, video games, anything that just gets our mind off of the laws of Yahweh and the work we're doing. So if we can go ahead and turn over to 1 Yahaqob 3 verse 4. It's on page, let's get here real quick. It's on page 965. 1 Yahaqob 3 verse 4. Whoever commits sin transgresses also the law, for sin is the transgression of the law. Sin is what's going to knock us off our tracks. Okay, we have this set track, and we have to learn that there's not a straight way, there's not a left way. We have to learn to take those tracks and set them to turn right. Right is the way. If we turn left, we let that sin and that bitterness build up inside of us, it destroys us. It completely takes everything we've learned in the past 10, 15, 20 years, and it completely throws it away. And let's go ahead and look down to 1 Yahaqob 3 verse 7. Little children, let no man deceive you. He who practices righteous is righteous just as he is righteous. And when we're younger, the mind's a little bit softer. You can kind of tell your child that, hey, you need to do this. It's easier to set that inside of them as they grow up inside the house to tell them, hey, we need to go this way. Going that way is going to lead to diseases. Everything you see going on in these last days right now. And let's go ahead and look down to verse 8. He who commits sin is of the devil, for the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of Yahweh was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. So it just builds up inside of us. It builds and builds and builds and builds. Bitterness, hatred. You just see it taking place left and right, whether it's you're working out in the road or you're working here. You just see this little bit of bitterness. 3 years down, the person's not even here because they let it build up inside of them. And if we can go ahead and turn over to Revelations 12, verse 9. It's on page 979, Revelations 12, verse 9. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil, and Satan who deceives the whole world. She was cast out into the earth, and her angels were cast out with her. So she decided that she was going to let bitterness and hatred build up inside of her. She wanted to destroy Yahweh's plan. She wanted to have her own thing. She didn't want to be under Yahweh. She did not want to listen. Listen, listen, listen. Obedience. You hear it left and right every day. Obedience, obedience, obedience is the key. But yet there's some of us that just still can't understand what obedience is. We understand the principle of it, but we don't want to understand what it actually entails us to do. You know, somebody tells you to do something, and you're like, but I just did this yesterday and I didn't have a single problem with it. You go to do that and then you end up having a problem with it. You just let bitterness slowly build up inside of you to that person when they tell you to do something. You just decide to walk out of here. I quit. I quit. I just don't want to have to deal with it anymore. I'd rather walk away and say I quit and not have to deal with the pressure anymore. But really, we're throwing away our whole entire lives when we do this. Let's go ahead and turn over to Luke 24, verse 25. It's on page 813. Luke 24, verse 25. Then Yahweh said to them, O fools and slow of hearts to believe all the prophets have spoken. Every single week, on the radio, every day, every minute, there's people being brought, bringing out these teachings. And sometimes we just decide not to listen to it, Why don't I go ahead and watch a movie all night instead of watching this sermon? How is watching that movie going to benefit you any? How is it going to benefit us? Is it going to benefit us in giving us a little fix for then? Is it going to give us a little boost of energy? Is it going to help us say, I'd rather go be like that character in that movie. I would rather do that instead of follow Yahweh's laws. That's what it does to us. It tears us down. It might not seem like it right then and there, but weeks on from there, you're like, I'd rather be like this guy. I'm going to start dressing like him. I'm going to start acting like him. And then before you know it, you're out of here. You can't understand the laws of Yahweh. You don't want to read the laws of Yahweh. You'd rather say, I'll go and watch a movie again. I'll keep on imprinting this in my mind. If we can go and turn over to Acts 3, verse 19. Right here. It's on page 842, Acts 3, verse 19. Repent, therefore, and be converted, that your sins may be blotted out, that times of refreshing may come from the presence of Yahweh. Instead of going to confessions on prep day night or Sabbath morning, when we can't make it prep day night, we decide, I'd rather go watch a movie. I'd rather go out to the bar. I'd rather go commit fornication and adultery, go eat unclean foods instead of going and confessing my sins and getting my mind right with Yahweh. Is that what we want to be? Do we want to be like gods? Do we want to rise ourselves up over other people? Is that what we're here for? We're here to complete Yahweh's last days work. And we need to listen to the last days anointed witness, Yisrayl Hawkins. And just try to keep this in your mind. It's tough. The tests and trials can... sometimes you over-exaggerate what they are, What Yeshua had to go through is nothing what we're going through right now. We're just going through a little bit right now. We have no idea exactly what was going through his mind, what was going on then. We aren't going through anything compared to what he went through. If we can just manage to take these little bitty things like somebody stepping on our toe or seeing sin, whether it's on a billboard or you're walking by and somebody says something, and it immediately takes your mind over, and you want to start going that way, back to Babylon, you need to learn to switch your direction to that right track. If you decide to go left or go straight, you're absolutely going nowhere. You're going straight into a hole. There's just a blank pothole there. You need to switch your direction to the right. If you don't, you're not going to be there in these last days. You're not going to be the first sons that we've been told for the last 40 years. We've been told this stuff over and over and over and over, and it seems like we hear the same thing every week, But yet a few days later, we can't even remember what he said. We can't remember what the speaker said. It just goes straight out of our head because we would rather follow the Babylonian system. We have to learn that if we want to be here, we want to stay here, we want to earn the right to be here, we want to prove ourselves to Yahweh, we have to stay on that right track. I heard someone talking about a scripture the other day, and I wanted to go ahead and cover it. It's Luke 21. Go and head back to Luke. And here, Luke 21. And it's verse 8. And it's on page 807. Luke 21, verse 8. Then he said, "Be on guard that you are not deceived. For many will come against my name, saying that I am, and the time has drawn near. Do not follow after them." Time and time again, somebody says, "Well, he's lying. I know what the scriptures say. I've been studying for forever. He's lying. He doesn't know what he's talking about." Sure enough, a couple weeks later, he's out of here, and he ends up starting up his own group. He wants to start up his own Bible study, but yet he doesn't even know what he's talking about. He's never read the scriptures before. He's never studied them before. You slowly let your mind get off track. You slowly let everything switch over. You slowly let Satan start building up in you. You slowly let the bitterness, the hatred, everything take over. And we have to learn that whenever something comes up like that, you need to switch your direction, switch your mind, start thinking of something else. Because before you know it, you'll be out there being just like one of them. You'll be a god. You'll be rising yourself up over somebody. Remember that we are here to listen to the last days anointed witness Yisrayl Hawkins. He is prophesied to teach us in these last days. So if we can just remember that and keep that in our mind from week to week, month to month, every year, just keep that in our minds. And with that, if we'll all please stand. I'd like to turn it over to Deacon Caleb Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom. You may all be seated. All right. So to get started today, that speech was perfect because it goes right in line with my own. You know, we didn't talk about this before we got up here and spoke. Everybody met this morning, but everything just fell in place. My title is, "You Can Endure Until the End." And to start off, I want to read a quote from the third book of Israel, because these 3 lines made the whole speech for me. It's on the third book of Israel, chapter 21, verse 85. Third book of Israel, chapter 21, verse 85. And it says, "And sin, which easily entraps us." The speaker before us just easily told us how sin entraps us, okay? Now, it says, "Entraps us, and let us run the race that is set before us with endurance. That is, let everyone be tried." Listen to me closely, okay? Let everyone be tried. Now, to go back a little bit, I went and looked up endurance, and it fit perfectly, especially with feasts coming up. Endurance in the Webster's Dictionary on, I would say the version, but it's the latest version on your smartphone. And it says the ability to withstand hardship or adversity, especially the ability to sustain a prolonged stressful effort or activity. Anybody feeling stressful? Feast is coming up. We should be. I mean, trying to get everything done in a short amount of time. Now let's turn over to Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 10. Because we need to have this endurance in order to fulfill what we are sent here to do. That is our purpose in these last days. Hebrews 10, verse 36. And it reads, "For you have need of endurance, so that after you have done the will of Yahweh, you may receive his promise." So we have it right here. We have this need of endurance. We need to incorporate it in our daily lives. If you don't have endurance, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to be, instead of going to confessions, we'll be out there watching movies. Or maybe during the week we'll be out there watching movies. Or maybe we'll be back talking to priests, or back talking somebody in authority that's over us, back talking to a supervisor. I don't really agree with what my supervisor says, because you know what he said to me last night? I don't really agree with this. That's how bitterness gets in. And that's something we have to get out. Now, let's turn over to Romans. We're going to go to Romans 5. Because remember, Yahweh judges us by our character. Our character is what he is judging us by. Are we going to become like him, as Genesis 1:26 says, to make man in his image according to his likeness? Are we going to fulfill that? Let's start at Romans 5, and we're going to read verse 3. It says, "Not only so, but let us rejoice in our tribulations, because we know that tribulation produces patience." Patience is a positive character trait. "Unswerving and perseverance, and patience a maturity of character." Maturity of character. So, when I seen that, I went and got my character unit here. There we go. Our character unit. And we're going to go to page 25. What's a maturity of character? We're going to read second paragraph. It says, "Character, on the other hand, helps you determine right and wrong." Character, on the other hand, helps us determine right and wrong. Character defines the way you treat yourself and others. What did Joshua say was the second greatest commandment? Love your neighbor as yourself. All right? So character defines the way you treat yourself and others. And remember, it says patience. Let's go. Where are we at? It's right here in 1 second. Right here. Positive character traits. You have patience. Patience is the third one. Demonstrating self-control while remaining calm through setbacks. That's what we have to fulfill this endurance. If we don't, how will we be found fit to go to the kingdom or to help others? Now, let's go over to page 18, because the end result of internalizing a positive character trait is clearly seen in your actions and attitudes. It's called integrity. And if we can internalize, which internalize means it's a part of who you are. So if we can get this maturity of character, because character is hope. Right here in Romans 5, verse 4, the last three words, and character is hope. And what does verse 5 say? And hope does not disappoint us, because Yahweh has poured out his love into our minds by the Holy Spirit, which he has given us. Holy Spirit, which he has given us. And who's given us that Holy Spirit in these last days? Who? Yisrayl Hawkins, that's correct. He's teaching us and training us all in these last days. Now, let's turn over to, actually, I'm going to read a quote real quick. It's from the 6th book of Israel. And it is 6th book of Israel, chapter 39, verse 39. It says, "So this should tell you right now that you have to be grounded in the laws of Yahweh." The speaker before me talked perfectly about being grounded in the laws of Yahweh. "In order to believe what Yahweh has put out today for this generation, you can run the race and be crowned and be exhaled. That's the way the apostles put it. You are running for a crown. As they said, believe the prophets, believe the one sent, as Yahweh said, and believe Yahweh who sent him." All right, and the one sent is Yisrayl Hawkins in these last days. So, I have one closing scripture, and it just popped in my mind. And for closing, it'll be Matthew 24. This next page. There we go. Matthew 24, and it's verse 13. Matthew 24:13, found on page 752. It says, "But he who endures until the end, the same will be saved." So if we can endure, if we can go through this, push through these tests and trials, we can endure into the end. And with that, if you all please stand. I'd like to turn over to the next speaker, a great deacon and fellow worker, Samuel Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. Please be seated. Praise Yahweh for the great Feast of Trumpets.
the beginning of the end of Yahweh's great feast cycle. You could be turning over to Daniel 9:24. Pastor touched on these scriptures the last time he spoke. And may the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. So the title for this speech is Yahweh's Name is the Peaceful Solution. Daniel 9:24. In it, Yahweh lays out 7 specific goals. And he gives a time limit there. He gives 70 weeks of years. I'll show you. So, this is a printout from my book of Yahweh. This is my original book of Yahweh. My handwriting has gotten better, somewhat. But you can see, and I've got it highlighted, 70 weeks are determined upon your people and upon your holy city. Number 1, to finish transgression. Number 2, to make an end of sins. Number 3, to make reconciliation for iniquity. And I have that marked out. Pastor had told us at one time we're going to make atonement for iniquity. And to bring in everlasting righteousness, seal up the vision. That's number 5, and the prophecy. So you get 2 right there, the vision and the prophecy. And number 7, to anoint the holiest of the holy people. So 70 weeks and 7 goals here, and we're talking about on the great 7th moon, the Feast of Trumpets. I'd like to look at the second item, reconciliation for iniquity. And we need to understand that iniquity is lies. Like the laws are done away with. You don't have to keep those old Hebrew laws, or you will not surely die. In 2 Timothy, for your notes, it says, everyone who reverences the name of Yahweh departs from iniquity. And when you depart from iniquity, you're making your decisions based on the laws of Yahweh. You're making your decisions based on the strength of Yahweh, the strong tower that is Yahweh's name. So, a long time ago, now remember, the name of Yahweh, when you show Him true respect, we have to decide against iniquity, the act of putting away Yahweh's laws, and there's a decision there. First, you have to learn to make a decision. A long time ago, someone first told me about the great house of Yahweh, and they wrote Yahweh's name on a white paper towel in black Sharpie ink. And he told me that it means I am that I am, and it also means, a deeper meaning is I am that which I choose to be. I am that which I choose to be. And I kept that in my wallet like money for a long time. I held on to it, and slowly but surely it started to take hold of me. I would take it out and just look at it from time to time and just dwell on it. I am that which I choose to be. And eventually I came to Yahweh's house and started to learn the peaceful solution. And it took me years before I realized the direct connection, the 100% unity between Yahweh's name and the peaceful solution. So, the basic teaching of the peaceful solution, everybody should know it, is to stop and think about your options and then proceed with the right choice. So, we all have options, right? It's great to have options. And what are options when you get down to it? What is another name for options? Choices. Exactly. Thank you. And when we have these options or choices, we have decision to make, and this is where we make the connection. I am that which I choose to be. Stop, think, options, proceed. They both have a choice. They both have an option there. Yahweh has the option of choosing in everything that He does. So, and He always chooses to be perfectly righteous. And when you choose to be perfectly righteous, you get the righteous rewards that come with it. So, once again, the fundamental teaching of the peaceful solution teaches us to make positive decisions, just like Yahweh. And in the same way, Yahweh's name describes how He makes His choices, how He decides on His options. So, Yahweh's name and the peaceful solution are one. And so, Pastor has been teaching the peaceful solution for years, and just in that STOP acronym, he's been teaching people Yahweh's name for years. How long has he had that written into the peaceful solution? This is at least since the 90s that I know about. And so he's not 100%. When we teach in the schools, we cannot teach religion. But he's teaching how to make a decision and the mechanics of making that decision so that when those people get here and they're introduced to Yahweh's laws, they'll have the foundation that it takes to make those righteous choices. So I have a little review here in Daniel 9:24. And so we're 70 weeks of years and a list of 7 things to do, 7 goals for Yahweh. That second one is number 2, atonement for iniquity. Pastor put the mechanics of Yahweh's name in the peaceful solution, and so they'll be better prepared when they finally do get to the great house of Yahweh. So with that, I had an audience participation portion. And so, if everybody could repeat after me. It's great to have options. And so, on the count of 3, we're all going to say, I have options. Ready? 1, 2, 3. I have options. That was okay. But this time, do it with a smile on your face. 1, 2, 3. I have options. A little bit better. All right, now this time, do it with a smile on your face and do it like you're really excited that you have options. Because it's really great to have options, right? 1, 2, 3. I have options. So, just to wrap up, be on guard against iniquity. People will tell you, just follow your heart. Because life is short. No, it ain't. Life is long. It takes forever if you do it right. And with that, I'll turn it over to the next speaker, the great Deacon Michael Asif Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Everyone. There's a real cute song that the boys did. It's called Yahweh's Special Message. And at the end it says, the laws are for everyone and you. So the ending's just perfect, so just had to throw that in. Okay, so we're going to start off. The title of my speech today is, Hold on to your crown, house of Yahweh. Don't ever let it go. So we're going to start off in Revelation. If you want to turn to Revelation chapter 3, that's found on page 73. Page 73. Or 973, excuse me. Page 973. Revelation 3. And we will be starting in verse 7. And of course, this is written to the last days house of Yahweh at Abel. And it says, to the Malak of the congregation of the house of Yahweh at Abel, write, these things says he who is holy, he who is true, he who has the key of David, he who opens and no man shuts, and shuts and no man opens. In verse 8, it says, I know your works. I know your works. I know your struggles. I know your tests and trials that are being allowed to be placed upon you. I know all the things you're going through. And I know your desire to be righteous and your overcoming that that's taking place in your life, the overcoming that you're getting to, becoming perfect before Yahweh. For you have a little strength. We have the strength that we need to help us overcome. He's given it to us. It's been promised to us. And we can overcome the things that are keeping us from perfection. We have that little bit of strength. We have the laws of Yahweh, and we have the great priesthood that Yahweh's brought forth. And of course, we have the great last days witness who's guiding us through all these things. And how you have kept my word, his laws and teachings that come forth from the house of Yahweh, and have not denied my name or the authority. It's very important that we don't deny the authority that Yahweh has given us to help us reach the standard of perfection he has set before us. Denying our counselors, the teachings, our supervisors, our parents, even an older sibling that may be placed over you for a certain thing. You have to be obedient to that authority in all things. If you look down to verse 10, because you have kept my word, because you have kept the word of my patience, I will also keep you from the 1 hour of temptation, which will come upon all the world to test those who dwell upon the earth. Behold, I come quickly. Hold fast. Hang on to that crown. Hold on to the things you've been taught. Hold on to everything you've learned. Don't throw it away. Don't let it get out of your reach. Don't let it get out of your grasp. Hold fast to that which you have, that no man, no one, nothing, anything takes your crown from you that's been given to you. Don't let it go. Don't let rebellion come into your life. Don't let disobedience come into your life. Submit. Be humble. Let your counselors guide you. Let your supervisors help you. We need all the help we can get right now to help us overcome. Don't lose that which Yahweh wants us to have, and which pastor and the priest and the priestesses work so hard to help us with. Okay? Some of the definitions for crown, I looked it up. I thought it was really interesting. Yes, a crown is an ornamental head covering or a headpiece, but it's also the top of something, like the crown or crest, the crown of a roof. And one thing I found really interesting is in the example given in Wikipedia, for the example was the crown of a hill. The crown of a hill. What's the highest point in Callahan County? Right here. Set upon that perfect hill, the house of Yahweh, set upon a high place, a mountain, an exalted place. It also means to be triumphant over an effort or endeavor, especially a prolonged one. An example, after years of struggle overcoming, we were finally crowned with a position in Yahweh's kingdom. And, I adjusted that for us, but it essentially said, after all these struggles, we were crowned with honor, is what it said in the definition. So we have these things available to us, the crowns of glory, the crowns of honor, the crowns of positions that we desire to have. And we've been given one crown in these last days, and that's Yisrayl Hawkins. A crown who's going to guide us in the ways, and then therefore we will be the jewels in his crown. We will help him in the work that he needs to get done. We will not be a burden. We can do these things, as I said before. We can endure these tests and trials, and we are all going through them right now as we draw close to feast, with the extra workload, with the things that have to get done, that we desire to get done because we want the world and our brothers and sisters when they come home to have all these great things and wonderful things ready for them so they can come home and rejoice with us. So when we go through these tests and trials, and like yesterday was, a lot of tests for me. I'm sure everybody else was going through tests. But I found myself self-talk. The Peaceful Solution talks about self-talk. It really does help you get through the things that you're struggling with. And I'm sure everybody does it. I'm going to tell you some of the things that I tell myself. Now, warning, you probably know these and you probably say them yourself. But, one thing I do when a heavy test kicks onto me or starts taking control and starts to affect my mind is, is this really that bad? Really, is this that bad? And I start thinking about what all the apostles and prophets went through. No, the tests aren't. I've said it before. The tests are really not that bad. And then this one, a person very close to me told me this one years ago, and I used it the other day. And I told my supervisor, I said, Con, I don't have a problem with this. My carnal mind has a big problem with it, So, and when you do that, when you say these little things to help you, it kind of separates you from what the carnal mind is thinking and helps you get focused on what is right and righteous and just and honorable before your parent, before your supervisor, before your counselors, before the teachings. You separate that and you look at what your carnal mind is doing, and then you can say, I don't want that. I want to do what's right. And yes, the carnal mind it's much needed to help us overcome, but we don't have to let it rule our lives and influence us to cause us to lose hold of our crown. We can say, no, this is the right way. I'm going to walk in this way. And we can do these things. And I can't stress that enough. Here's another one. Working on something on the computer, and all of us who work on computers know that sometimes they have a life of their own and decide that they're going to take a nap when you least expect it, and the computer shuts down, and you're sitting there staring at the screen going, I just did 2 hours of work and I forgot to save. And it's not like, one or two little things. It's like lots of things, and you got to go back and remember what you did. You have to redo it all. And so, I was telling, again, my supervisor this, it is what it is. What am I going to do? It is what it is. What am I going to do about it? Nothing. So, okay. And it's like I told him yesterday. I said, I'm just going to do it all over again, because that's probably the best thing to do. And my supervisor's guidance was very much needed yesterday. And that's why you can rely on your supervisors. Trust in them. They will help you. Okay? And he helped me big time yesterday. So, and then, sometimes things that, you go to, I was talking with a brother today, and you go to do something and all of a sudden it's not working, and you're like, and you kind of laugh about it because it's like, really? Really it's not working? It was just working 2 minutes ago, and all of a sudden it never falls apart. It never breaks. It never shuts down. So you kind of can look at certain things humorous because you're being tested. But you have to look at them positively, and you have to remember that we are being tested. Okay, if we turn over to page 960, this is 1 Kepha 5. 960, 1 Kepha 5. And that's page 960, we're starting verse 8. Actually, let's look up to 6. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of Yahweh, under the authority of your counselors, under the authority of your parents, under the authority of your supervisors. Humble yourself under that authority, in order that Yahweh may exalt you in due time. Okay, wait on Yahweh. Now this is important. Cast your cares upon Him, for He cares for you. Yahweh knows what we're going through, and sometimes all times, prayer helps. And if you're just so at the end of your rope that it's just so stressful, pray. Get permission if you're, with your counselors to get with them and talk with them and get guidance on it. Yahweh will help you through these things, through your counselors, through your supervisor, through your parents. Go to your parents if you're having trouble, you young people. Okay, let's look up to verse 4. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive a crown of glory which will not fade away. It will never fade away. Okay? So hold on to that crown. Humble yourself. Keep a positive mental note. When the tests come, recognize and acknowledge to yourself and remind yourself that you're being tested, and then act righteously and accordingly to help you pass that test so that you will not lose hold of the crown that Yahweh has set before you. Because that crown, brothers and sisters, is far greater than anything this world will ever have to offer. So remember these things, brethren. Have a great feast. May Yahweh bless your understanding. Please stand. I have the honor to turn over to a great brother, a fellow worker in Yahweh's house, the great Deacon Anthea Alexander Hawkins. Yahweh bless.
Shalom, Shabbat Shalom, great saints of Yahweh. May be seated. And may the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of us this great day of trumpets. If you will be turning over to page 973. Page 973 in your scriptures. We're going to continue on the theme that you've been hearing about this crown, this reward that Yahweh has chosen and set aside a small remnant at this time to train, to see how we could get along with each other, and to work out the crinks and wrinkles so we can get along with each other to become this family that Yahweh desired to have. It's a beautiful desire. And you heard the great deacon talking about crown, and we continue in that theme. Now if we notice here, in verse 8, it says, I know your works. I know your works. And he's talking to the Philadelphia group here. And let's move over to verse 11. Behold, I come quickly, hold fast that which you have, that no man take your crown. That no man take your crown. Why will it have to be worded that way if we automatically would receive this crown? Remember the scripture talks about the devil is like a roaring lion seeking whom she may devour. Okay? And we have to keep these things in mind. We have to keep reminding each other about exhorting each other as the day draw near, and building each other up, encouraging each other, stressing that we have the ability to overcome. We have the ability to be as one, to be one family, united under our great pastor and overseer, Yisrayl Hawkins. This bitterness sometimes come into play. And where does this bitterness come from? It could be genetics, it could be influences. But bitterness seems to be something also we have to contend and get out of, mostly important in our lives in these last days, because of the destruction that it brings. So the first speaker was talking about this, that when we are pulled away and drawn away to do certain things, it builds in our mind this defense mechanism. I'm right. I'm justifiable in what I'm doing here. I want to do this right now. As I'm talking about this crown too, I want to look at, again, the teenagers, the youths in the house of Yahweh today. Because we're all competing for a prize. We are all competing for a prize. Let's look at 1 Corinthians. Let's go over there. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. We are all competing for a prize. Verse 22. We're going to start at verse 22. To the weak I became as weak, that I might win the weak. Okay, not that you will give up your salvation or you'll run off from drinking or smoking or doing something we know we're not supposed to be doing. That is forbidden. I have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. Look at verse 24. Do you not know that those who run in a race all compete, but only one received the prize? Many adults, if you had been in the world, we've been in this situation before. You know how it feels to be second or third or last. So run your race that you may lay hold of the prize and make it yours. And everyone who competes conduct himself temperately. in all things. Now they compete to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Our tests, our trials, is definitely going to be a lot harder. Mental, spiritual, based upon the effort and time we put in to building our character, studying with those around us. At the house of Yahweh, when we come to the house of Yahweh, we chose this way of life. We chose to put aside the things that the world offer as far as the luxuries and the entertainment for our salvation, because we see something better. We saw a better opportunity in sticking with the 1 cent. We saw a better hope for the future, knowing and seeing the way the world is going right now. There is no future in it. From the article we just heard last week and many others, there is no future. That could have been easily one of our sons or daughters. And simply, because we didn't follow his simple instructions to, like spraying or wearing socks and shoes or gloves. The crown that Yahweh wants to give us, he wants to give us as a family. It's a family that he's looking at. He's looking for. They're talking down or belittling each other or bullying. It doesn't work, nor will it ever work or be allowed in Yahweh's kingdom. I am not better than you. Will never be part of Yahweh's character. Yahweh is working and building a family, a priestly family, sons and daughters. And we must keep these things in mind. Remember first, Yachanan 6:29? What is the work of Yahweh? House of Yahweh, what is the work of Yahweh? Believe the 1 cent is the work of Yahweh. Period. Period. Pastor give a direction is not to be questioned, is not to be interpreted or anything. It's to be followed directly as he give it. Right? House of Yahweh? It's very important as we're talking about the crown, and this crown we are working so hard to receive. Turn over to page 953. Page 953. This is a beautiful crown, but we have to work. We have our part to do. It's not just going to be given to us. I tell my family all the time, this is the most beautiful reward Yahweh wants to give. That's why the test is so great. If it was easy, everybody would be here. Everyone would be in this room right now. Just come say a couple Hail Marys, eat a pill, and hey, you got it made. But no, it's not that way at all with Yahweh. We have to put the work in. In chapter 1, let's look at verse 12. Blessed is the man who endures temptation, for when he has been proved, he will receive a crown of life, which Yahweh has promised to those who love him. How's Yahweh? What is love? 1 Yachanan 5, right? Love the keeping of the law. Love the righteous fellowship. When we see a fault with each other, what should we do? Let me find my best friend, and we'll go talk about that individual. Is that building that individual up? Is that helping anyone? Is that even helping me? No. We should be thinking of ways we could conduct ourselves to be a better example to that person. I see many times the children sometimes, when they do things, I've seen adults make goofy faces to the children, and then when that child do it, he gets in trouble. He gets in trouble. But where is that individual who taught that child how to do that foolish thing he just did? We have to be mindful of our example. How we expect that child to express and explain himself fully, so-and-so taught me this and that's why I did it. Well, you know better, young man. You know not to do that, right? Well, you have to be taught, trained. Most importantly, he has to see our example. Because that's going to speak volumes more than anything else I could ever say to you up here. It's our example. I'm getting to a very important point that I want everyone to pay close attention to, because it's high time we start realizing how serious our calling is, how precious and how valuable our position is, and how easily we could throw it away. The adversary is not playing. She knows her time is short, and she will do anything, everything as possible in her power to destroy each and every last one of us. She know, you know what? Man, they're so well. Look at those people. They dress well. They're educated. They're smart. Can't get to them. Look at this. So she has to play on our weaknesses, the things that we're still overcoming, and use those little things to go back and forth with on each other. We have to stop these things. Bridle the tongue, verse 26. Bridle the tongue. This is a great chapter to get into. Bridle the tongue. I want to move on, page 939. We have to learn to bridle the tongue, brothers and sisters. It's a work. It's not easy. 2 Timothy chapter 4. Verse 8. From here on, there is stored up for me a crown of righteousness, which Yahshua the righteous judge will give me at that day, and not to me only, see that? But also to all those who love his appearing. All. A family, a family, a family, a family, a family. Yes, we each have to work out our own salvation. But we need each other to help with that too. We need each other's support. Positive, righteous support. Not tearing down each other. Children, you need to understand this too. The teachers are there to guide you, to mold you, to show you the right way to life. The world is not as pretty as it's painted. Stand your grounds. That's one of the laws the world has now. Stand your grounds. So if I push you by accident and you have a gun on your side, well, you can shoot me, right? Although my family is sitting right there in the vehicle. It's on the news. Is that the world we want? Does that look like unity? Does that look like love? These are real. I'm not trying to scare anyone. Okay, that's on the news. It may look lovely at times. They have a circus. They have these things go all around. Ferris wheels. They got a lot of things that could attract our mind. The music, everything. They could pull at you. The dress code, they could pull at us. So many things. But this crown that we just read in Corinthians, this imperishable crown, is what we are choosing to give up and give away. Right now, it seems that, well, the house of Yahweh is not so popular in the eyes of the world. What I mean by popular is in a positive light, as you see some of these movie stars and the gods of the world. But Yahweh is lifting his house up. We can't stay in the back. I want to jump in when Yahweh then ready to put it out there for the whole universe to see. You have to do your part now. We have to do our part now. And I'm talking about working as a family. Working as a family. Don't lose sight of that. Let's look at Ecclesiastes, please. Something very important here. In the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 10. I want us to get this in our mind. Chapter 10, verse 20. Everyone, please look at that scripture. It's too important. Do not curse the king, even in your thoughts. Who is our king? I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Is Yisrayl Hawkins your king? Is he our king? Is he our overseer, our teacher? Let us sink in our minds. Do not curse the rich, even in the bedroom. Or a bird of the air may hear and carry your voice. But that's what I want to really get in our minds. Do not curse the king, even in our thoughts. With your thoughts. What your thoughts leads to. Then what feelings leads to? Action. Yes. And that root of bitterness will start showing. Or that righteous character will start flourishing and showing. And that is what we want to see. That is what Yahweh is looking for in his family. Okay? I want us to start thinking about these things, because this is a crown, an opportunity that Yahweh has given each and every one of us, but we could throw it away also if we're not careful. If we're not supporting and building up each other in love, care, concern, a deep concern, to work with you until the end, until there's no hope left. It's what Yahweh is doing. Until there is no hope left, he will keep working with each and every one of us, because he wants to see us in this kingdom. Please stand. I pray that Yahweh will bless your understanding. This time, I have the honor and privilege to turn it over to the great Kohan, Yisrayl Hawkins.
Hey, Yahweh, you can be seated. All right, I'm going to continue with where I left off, or at least some of the things that I left out of the sermon. Yisrayl Hawkins will square this circle. Now, we showed a picture of the temple and how the square overlays over the temple, and I read the scripture in Isaiah 44. Now, this is the Masonic symbol. The two laws, remember, when I started the sermon before, that I wanted you to keep in mind was Prohibitive Law 246, do not remove landmarks or alter boundaries, and also Prohibitive Law 271, do not use dishonest weights and measures. And that deals with the boundaries of, like, the temple or your judgments. So this symbol right here, I should have used the law, don't accept gifts, because on my porch I found $10,000 in a brick. That's a Mason joke. Okay. I'll deliver that again. No. What I'm going to do is I'm going to describe to you what I did when I overlaid this. If you remember this symbol, I used a compass. Now this was from Isaiah 44. In chapter 13, when it says, a carpenter stretches out his measure and marks the outline. He roughs it out with chisel and marks it with a compass. And the chisel talked about the corners of the building. Now, if you were going to describe what you were doing, you would take a straight edge and you would draw any line. It has any length. But what ends up taking place is, as long as when you want to bisect the line, which means cut it evenly in half, you can do it without measuring. What you would do is you would swing two arcs like we did here, and where the 2 points of the arc on the top and the bottom, where they meet, you draw a line down, and what it does is it makes a perpendicular line, which would be a right angle. So this point would contain all right angles, all 90 degrees. And then your center point, which holds significance where that was where the altar of death was, you would swing the circle, and where it connects to your perpendicular line and the line you created first, where they all connect, you would take those points, connect them, making the square. Okay, and if you remember, it talked about the corners of the court, and again, the altar of death being in the center. Now, they do this without measuring. There was a Greek geometer called Euclid, and he did all of his measurements just straight line and compass. And it deals with science. If you read Did Yeshua Messiah Pre-Exist, what they do is they try to take away a lot of information, because they're dealing with, when you reject Yahweh, you're dealing with nothing. So they're trying to understand what they can be certain about. That's when you deal with the Enlightenment, and in the 1600s, when the Scriptures was re-released, you had the Enlightenment, where they were trying to develop a new type of morality. The Catholic Church was bringing this out, and decided to try to throw out all knowledge and try to say, what can we be certain about? René Descartes was a philosopher who said he was interested in doubting everything. I won't believe anything. And then he comes up with the theory, the only thing that he couldn't doubt was that he existed, and he used the statement, I think, therefore I am, because he couldn't doubt that he was thinking. So what they do is they take away all the information. So Euclid used a straight edge with no numbers on it. All right? When you get numbers, when you start adding numbers and you start growing in the information that you have, I'm going to use an example of using a meter. Okay? Now, this meter originated, the metric system, in France. Okay? In the 1790s, and 1 meter is equal to 1/10,000,000th of the distance from the equator to the North Pole. Okay, now, if you look up how they measure it now, they say it's based on 1 minute of arc. The Geneva Conference of 1984 said it's the distance that light travels in a vacuum over a certain space. But what it is when they originally did it, it was the distance from the equator to the North Pole. And I just want you to remember the North Pole. Okay, now, it's the distance from the equator to the North Pole along a meridian through Paris. Now, Greenwich Mean Time is where all time is based off of Greenwich as the meridian. This is where you get longitude and latitude. We're all stressed. Like if you look in history and have any time when they were mapping the world, okay, and they always knew the world was a globe. Ignorant people thought it was flat. Because if you were going to sail, you needed to know where you were on the sea, and you didn't have any guidance. You had to know, that was the big thing of when they found longitude. They had to use it using time, but they needed to know where it was on a land mass, and they had to take also a clock with them on a ship, and both clocks had to hold the same time so they could find their longitude, so they could know where they were. But so meridian, okay, when they select a meridian, this is the up and down line, okay? The up and down line is from the Latin meridium, meaning noon, okay, because they did it based off of the sun, and metis, if I'm pronouncing that right, meaning middle. Now, all of that I really just was to set you up so I could tell you where the house of Yahweh was established. On page 157 in Deuteronomy 12:5, if you were looking at the middle point of something, the hub or the central place of authority, Deuteronomy 12:5, but you are to seek the habitation of your father, the house of Yahweh, the place which Yahweh your father shall choose out of all your tribes to establish his name. There you must go. Okay? That was the first booklet I read, was the house of Yahweh established. But there you must go, the place that Yahweh chose to place his name. Page 566, Isaiah 57:11. Now, this is where, when you talk about authority, okay, going to the place Yahweh chose to place his name. Now, the world threw that away. They hid the scriptures, and in the 1600s, they were forced to re-release it. And they progressed to move away from Yahweh because, and if you read verse 11 here, 57:11, and whom have you been afraid or feared? This is reverenced. That you have lied and have not remembered me. Now, Yahweh's in complete control, okay? But Yahweh says, you've not remembered me nor taken it to your heart. Is it not because I have held my peace, remaining silent for a long time, so you do not reverence me? If there was a person, a one sent to preach the message, you would convert the world. 12 months, you would convert the world. If you were to teach this message, everyone would gain understanding because of the teaching you how to make choices and do all of those things. But because Yahweh was silent, man has gone his own way. In page 630, Yeketziah 7:2, referring to what the world has taken on for judgment, page 630, Yeketziah 7:2, 630. Yeketziah 7 and verse 2. Now the end has come upon you, and I will send my judgment against you. I'm putting that in place of anger. I will judge you according to your ways and will pay all your abominations. I'm reading verse 3, sorry. Also, Son of Man, this is what Father Yahweh says to the land of Israel. An end. We're living in the last days, the end time spoken of. An end has come upon the four corners of the land. Okay, this is referring to the judgments. Okay, the way the world judges. An end has come. You're in the last days. And if you remember, geometry all deals with shapes, and it means measure the earth. And when they do it, they're basically finding a way to cut up the land and do all of those things. If you look up, there's a phrase called gerrymandering. It was a governor in Massachusetts, but what he did was he created political boundaries. And they call it the shape of a salamander, but what it is where you basically encompass your district and kind of enclose everybody so that you have political authority in that area. It's referred to as gerrymandering. I was going to show you a map, but it's basically where you alter things for political gain. Okay, and politics comes from the word city, of how you run a city. In Isaiah 5 and verse 8, this is page 532. It says, I'll read it. Woe to those who join house to house, laying field to field, till there is no place for others, taking advantage of other people. Isaiah 14 and verse 13 refers to how Satan says, I will raise my throne above the heavens. And the side note there refers to the temple being on the north side. And if you turn to page 452, which is Psalms 48 and verse 2, this is referring to north because north tends to relate to power, like the king of the north. Psalms 48 and verse 2, page 452. The side note from Isaiah 14 and 13 tells you to turn here. Psalms 48 and verse 2. Beautiful for elevation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion. On the sides of the north, the city of the great king. If you turn to Zechariah 1 and verse 16, this is page 718. It says, therefore, this is what Yahweh says. I have returned to Jerusalem with mercies. My house will be built in it, says Yahweh of hosts, and a measuring line will be stretched out over Jerusalem. Now, the measuring line refers to, will help in the building of this great house of Yahweh. On page 719, Zechariah 6 in verse 12. Zechariah 6 and verse 12. Speak to him and say, this is what Yahweh of hosts says. Behold the man whose name is the branch, for he will branch out from his place, and he will build the house of Yahweh. Now, Revelations 11, I'm sorry to be jumping to these scriptures so quickly, Revelations 11 and verse 1, page 977. It says, "And there was given me a reed like a measuring rod. And the Malak stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of Yahweh, and the altar in its confines." Okay, now the temple, so he's measuring the temple on page 631, Yeketskia 9 and verse 2. Yeketskia 9 and verse 2. Then he called, I'm going to read 1. "And then he called in my hearing with a loud voice, saying, Let those who have charge over the city draw near. Each man," it says with his weapon, but I have the side note. I'm trying to read with the side note I had. "Each man with his weapon of destruction in his hand." Now, Khan Yehuda broke this down, and I have a lot of notes here, but I just want to get through the scripture. "And behold, 6 men came from the direction of the upper gate which faces north, each with his," let's see, okay, my city and people overflows with righteousness is what I have for the word deadly. Okay, so with his righteous weapon, we'll say the two-edged sword of Yahweh in his hand, and one man among them was clothed in linen and had a writer's inkhorn at his side. Now this is the measuring reed. Okay, so pastor writes, he brings forth the teachings, and he measures the land. He sets boundaries. He teaches the law to you. And if you remember in Genesis, when it talked about fill the earth and subdue it, and the word fill meant to set boundaries or to fence. And did Yeshua Messiah pre-exist in 158 in order to not let the people to succumb to the Greek culture, which promoted individuality, like an individual mindset, serving yourself? One of the things that protected the people of Yahweh is written here on page 158. It says the Yadayim and their reaction to the reform of Hellenizers, Greek culture upon the people. And Pastor underlines this passage, which is in the Encyclopedia Judaica. "The fence which the rabbis created," the fence is in quotes, "created around the Torah, succeeded on the whole in keeping the masses of the Jews from succumbing to Greek culture, as complaints about the Jewish religious and social separateness indicates." So the law that pastor teaches us will protect us from the world. The boundaries that are set for us will protect us from the world. Okay, when pastor has this measuring line, he measures the earth, and he is basically setting the boundaries for us. On page 711 in Habakkuk 3:6, I got 2 scriptures. Page 711. Habakkuk 3:6. "He stood and measured the earth. He looked and shook the nations, and everlasting mountains were scattered, and the perpetual hills bowed. His ways are everlasting." And the side note here says, Yahweh manifests his great and marvelous powers when he delivers his people. And if you remember in Isaiah in 44, the description that was given and talks about pastor, and it states how man makes gods for themselves. And Yahweh says, Yisrayl, I formed you. If you turn to page 757, Isaiah 43, this is what pastor's teachings do for us. Isaiah 43, page 557. Isaiah 43, verses 20 and 21. The beasts of the field will honor me, the jackals and the owls, because I give waters in the wilderness and rivers in the desert to give drink to my people, my chosen. Okay, we are the chosen of Yahweh. No, Yeshua said, no man can come to me unless the Father draws him. And in verse 21, this people I have formed for myself. They will show forth, proclaim, and declare my praise. This is the ability that we are going to have when we follow pastor's instructions as the one sent. Yahweh formed Yisrael. We heed his instructions, and Yahweh will say, I formed my people. And we follow pastor, and that's the honor we receive. If you, with that, if you all please stand. I turn the service over to the great Khan Kananya.
Shabbat Shalom. You may be seated. I want to caution you that you're going to probably receive an abundance of blessings. All right? Remember what your blessings are, right? Your tests and your trials. And like Pastor said last Sabbath, which was only a couple days ago, he said, it's a great thing to be tested in the house of Yahweh, because we're being tried for the greatest family in the universe. The greatest family in the universe. You think about the greatest family that you might want to consider the greatest family in the world, and the pomp and the pompous and the tabloids that they show about these people and what they do. Oh, they took a vacation recently, or they did this, or they did that. That doesn't really amount to anything. Our glory is going to be far above that, because we have the solution to not only the world's, but the entire universe's problems. That's why they're waiting for the revealing of the sons of men. You realize that? You sitting in this house right now, and those who came before us and are a part of us, they can't wait until Yahweh's family is fully established, because they are tired of the suffering that they've been going through because of the evil like the gods. So you have the greatest blessing, brothers and sisters. You have the greatest blessing ever offered to any of Yahweh's creation. And you consider what we have with the 7 works, that Yahweh could have had any of us born at any time, in any era, but he chose to have us born in these last days. So you should rejoice in that every morning, that you are at the feet of the priest of the 7th trumpeter. Praise Yahweh. A great deacon Samuel, I think he sent the little birdie to look over my shoulder when I was preparing my message here, because he is right on track with what I want to bring. And the other speakers in building you up and building up the house of Yahweh did an awesome job in regards to the teachings, the endurance that we need to have. Blessed are those who endure unto the end. But we're going to continue on here, leaving off where the great Kahan left, talking about the 7th work. And of course, Yahweh is building and he's forming this family. And those rules that Yahweh gives, if you remember what we teach in the beginning series of the Peaceful Solution, and we talk to the children and we teach them the importance of rules. They are there to keep us safe, right? The rules are there to keep us safe. And if you think about the simplicity of the laws of Yahweh, they're there in essence to keep us safe, to keep us from suffering the curses that come when those rules or those laws are broken. Well, the title of my speech is the 7th work, which brings in everlasting righteousness. You know, Pastor, he never ceases to amaze me, and been teaching the same out of the same book for 40 plus years before I was ever born. This is the book that Yahweh had chosen to be formed. 66 books placed in this book of Yahweh. Search out the book of Yahweh and read, and the information is the same. It doesn't change. It's not like Yahweh goes in and switches words around to present a different meaning. He grants greater understanding to us the further we go in our studies, but he's been teaching out of this book for as long as I've known. He has not had any reason to bring in something else outside of that which explains and uncovers the meanings of these words, but it's been from the book of Yahweh ever since we've been in the house of Yahweh. And last Sabbath, he talked about Daniel chapter 9, verse 24, and he was talking about those 70 weeks. If you look back on verse 23 on page 681, he says there, Daniel says, at the beginning of your supplications, the command was given, and I have come to show you, well, this was someone speaking to Daniel, for you are greatly beloved. Therefore, understand the matter and consider the vision. 70 weeks are determined upon your people. And of course, Mark of the Beast, Mark of the Beast, volumes 1 and 2 goes into great detail about that. Birth of the nuclear baby, talking about these 70 weeks that are determined upon the people, Yahweh's people, and upon your holy city. And then he goes into several points here. To finish transgression, all right, that's one point, as the great deacon covered here before here. To finish the transgression, this was a great blessing to me because when I was thinking about what I was going to present, I considered this, what Pastor had brought out last Sabbath, and it was awesome because I was able to literally go back to the official House of Yahweh page on Facebook and watch that sermon immediately. And I was able to catch things that I didn't have available. So we have absolutely no excuse. If you get up and you go to the bathroom, if you're sick or if you're not around or whatever the reason is, Yahweh has made it to where there is no reason why we can't have this oil poured into our bowls in these last days. And we have to take full advantage of it. And you can see with everything that Yahweh allowed in Daniel, I don't want to get off track, but what Yahweh allowed when he said in Daniel that technology would increase, that technology increasing is a great benefit to us in these last days. And even those who are not here in the house of Yahweh right now, they have resources that when I came many years ago, and there's others that can tell you the same thing, we would have never even dreamed about being able to sit in our house and watch Sabbath services live. We had to wait 2 weeks. And that seemed like the longest weeks, 2 weeks on the face of the planet to get our sermon cassette tapes. And we would get upset with the mail person if they didn't deliver them, because we were hungering and thirsting for that knowledge that comes from his house. I hope we still have that hunger, that desire, that zeal for Yahweh's house, and to sit at the feet of the priest and to hear the message of Yahweh coming forth. Never allow that love, family, never allow that love for Yahweh or that craving or that desire for Yahweh's word or for the righteousness that comes when we practice those words. Never allow that to die within you. Keep that fire burning. And the only way you can do it is to listen, to study, to set your mind in advance, and to put these things into practice. And of course, as you do the works, it's like a fire. It constantly needs oxygen and it constantly needs fuel. So you'll use it up and your spirit holy will be craving more and you'll go hunting for it. But if you just let it die and you don't do anything with it, then spirit holy will be grieved and it eventually will die as well. But that first point there in Daniel chapter 9, verse 24, he talks about finishing transgression, and we won't go too far into this, but of course, remember transgression, 1 Yahaqob 3:4, sin is the transgression of Yahweh's laws, which comes about because of the teaching of the evil like the gods. If you turn back to, turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 4. 2 Corinthians chapter 4. Oops. Is that right? Yeah. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 4. And Yeshua also talked about this. Daniel did too. He said he was amazed by the great amount of laws that the beast passed. But Yeshua said that the iniquity will abound in this time period. The rejecting of the laws of Yahweh would abound in this time period, which would cause the love to grow cold. Well, we know where that teaching of iniquity is coming from. It's coming from this same beast that's shown in Revelation chapter 13, that the two-horned beast, or the United States in these last days that came up with two horns, the Catholics and the Protestants said, let us be like the first beast. Of course, they're led by Satan, so they're led by Satan. It's not Satan herself, although she is behind it. Same thing Yeshua told them, you are of your teacher, who is Satan the devil. She was a liar from the beginning. Well, they're following the same things. And remember, what makes a god is it's not just a piece of gas, but it's any individual who raises themselves above their fellow man, who puts themselves above the laws of Yahweh their Father, who thinks themselves more highly than they ought to, right? But they have blinded the minds of those who do not believe through the teaching. Now, you can see the difference between the house of Yahweh and the gods. the house of Yahweh gives light. The God's blind, so you can't see the light. So that the light of the message, now that means that if they're blinding the eyes, so that the light of the message of the glory of Messiah, who is in the image of Yahweh, should not shine to them. If they're blinding them from that, then that has to mean that the light is going out, right? If the light wasn't in existence, then there would be no need to blind them because they're already walking in darkness. And before the house of Yahweh was established in this time period, in these last days, there was no light. You remember what Isaiah said? There was no one to preach this message. I looked and I didn't see anybody. But in the last days, Yahweh, he got that spark to going again. And of course, this seventh work, which is that western lamp there, is prophesied to never go out. You know, that's something that we should rejoice in, and we consider that from the previous works, is that in Isaiah here, let's see here, is that right? No. Zechariah, in Zechariah chapter 4, and we've all read this here, so we probably know it by heart, but in verse 6, let me see here, back up to verse 2. Zechariah chapter 4, verse 2. And said to me, what do you see? So I said, I see, and behold, a lampstand all of gold, with its bowl for oil on top of it, with its 7 lamps on it, and there are 7 pipes to the 7 lamps. And in verse 3, and there are 2 olive trees by it, one on the right side of it, and the other upon the left side. And then if you look down to verse 11, then I answered and said to him, what are these 2 olive trees upon the right side and the right side of the lampstand and upon the left side of it? Then I spoke again and said to him, these are the 2 olive branches which through the golden pipes empty the golden oil through them. So, understanding the fact that this seventh work will not go out, this 7 lamp will not stop shining, that gives us confidence to know that that tree is going to continue to be there, pumping that golden oil into that bowl, right? So we're always going to have our teacher here to guide us in the laws of Yahweh and bring us to this perfection that Yahweh talks about and prophesied in Daniel chapter 9, verse 24. Turn back there. I should have told you to hold your spot. Daniel chapter 9, verse 24. You see, we get practices in multitasking too in the house of Yahweh. I've never known that you can use all 10 fingers to go to different places in books until Pastor gets on a roll there and starts telling us to go back and forth. Well, anyway, the next point there is make an end of sins. Make an end of sins. And Pastor said last week, he said, this 70 weeks of years, he said, this is a time of action. These things are brought in by Yahweh through 7 works that he lined up before the world was created. Okay, so Yahweh lined this up, Yahaqob, 1, chapter 1 through 5, and of course Ephesians. If you turn back there, I'd like to read that. Ephesians chapter 1, and we're going to look at verses 4, 5, and 9. Ephesians chapter 1. There we go. And look at verse 4. Okay, the pastor says he lined this up before the world was created. And in verse 4 he says in Ephesians chapter 1, because he chose us with him before the foundation of the world, that we were to be holy and without blame before him in love. That we were to be without this. How many of us were already holy and without blame before we came here? None of us, right? But Yahweh speaks as if it was already done, and this is his goal, his plan for mankind, to make us holy and without blame. And remember, anointing the holiest of the holy people. This is what he's called us to do here and to become. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, laying that out from the very beginning. Preordaining us to be his children by adoption through Yeshua Messiah according to the righteous pleasure of his plan. And in verse 9 there it says, having revealed to us the great secret of his plan, according to the righteous pleasure which he has purposed to himself. The great secret. Now, that should be getting your wheels spinning in your mind regarding those 2 words, great secret. Right? Where are you thinking about those words right there? That's right. Revelations 10:7, which means that this great secret wasn't available until there was someone to reveal it. Now Daniel was told to, close up the book, shut them up, for the time is for a later date. Well, those things, that great secret, though, that information was shut off for mankind for thousands of years, right? But we had a man who qualified through the plan of Yahweh, the breeding program, and the plan of righteousness, the blessing that was promised to Abraham, remember, who qualified, as Revelations talks about, to open up those seals and reveal their meanings. And he didn't just speak them out, he gave them to a man to reveal these things to the world in these last days, to his house and to the world, to show the plan of Yahweh and also to give a warning to mankind of what their end will be. So, Pastor says he did this before the earth was created. This plan was with Yahweh to bring forth a righteous family, which you're sitting in right now. You're part of it right now. And if you just keep in mind Moshe chapter 3, verse 2, which says, you only of the families of the earth have I known. Genesis chapter 49:1, Pastor has gone over that scripture many times, but we see coming forth from those 12 tribes there. And remember, it wasn't a linear genealogy. I mean, those men, and they had spread out and they breed with other families and so forth, but the promise was always to those who keep the laws of Yahweh. Remember, Yahweh gave in the scriptures, he said, even if the son of the Gentile wants to come to the feast, then let him follow these laws, and I will accept him. Yahweh is not a respecter of persons. If anybody wants to keep the laws of Yahweh, now he's not going to say, well, you're not part of this family. I don't know what you're talking about, He'll open the doors and allow them to come to his house because his desire is that no one should perish. And it can only be through the righteousness, the continuous keeping of the laws of Yahweh in an individual's life, in the lives of the people of a city, of a nation, that will ensure that peace and that longevity that we all desire without curses. Yahweh is the only person that can teach you to have everything that you desire without adding any curse to it. You don't need a supplement to go with it, an amendment. You don't need to add something on to the tail end of it. No, if you just keep the laws the way Yahweh gives them to you and don't add to or take away from them, then you'll have peace. So anyway, Pastor says he says you can take it away at any time if you want. You can cast it off. Now notice again, he said it's us. We're in full control of the decisions that we make. Yahweh's in full control of his plan, but Genesis chapter what is it? I just forgot my place there. Free moral agency, right? Not Genesis, Deuteronomy. That's why I'm not thinking about it. Deuteronomy says we're free moral agents to choose between life and death, right? He leaves it completely up to us. The next point there was to make reconciliation for past iniquity for your past sins. And he says we wouldn't have a right to go on living if it wasn't for Yahshua. Because Yahshua actually died for our past sins. Now, like it's been said before, he's not going to keep on dying over and over again as we continue to sin. But Yahweh does leave a way of escape for us to get ourselves right, to make straight our lives and our service to Yahweh. But what Yahshua did has already been done. Okay, he's not going to do that again. And of course, we go through that every year at Yahshua's memorial at the first part of the moon Yahweh there, that evening before the Passover. And then the fourth point there is to bring in everlasting righteousness. And this is what really caught my attention when Pastor was speaking about it. He says, and Pastor's quoting here, I quote, he says, that's what you're doing right now. While you're sitting here listening to these scriptures, you're sitting right here. You're the ones, the righteousness that Yahweh is bringing in. You are the ones, the righteousness that Yahweh is bringing in. And he also talked about our attitudes. We got to have a righteous attitude. We can't have bitterness and rebellion in our hearts and our minds because it's not going to work. The rebellion is as witchcraft to Yahweh, and it's never going to be in the kingdom. I remember Pastor saying a long time ago, he said, like Yahweh, I can imagine, I myself like to surround myself with people who are going to bring me joy. That are going to make me joyous in the work that I have to do. And it makes a whole difference when you're working around people who enjoy what they're doing compared to somebody who's got a storm cloud hanging over their head and their lip hanging out the bottom of their, all the way down to their feet. And that's what we have to be. We have to be the joy. We have to bring the light to one another. We have to be Yahweh's face to everyone else. We can't forget these things. I know with the daily grind, it's easy to kind of lose focus. And no one said it was going to be easy. Yahweh never promised us a bed of roses. Yeshua said it's a straight and narrow path, right? He said it's a straight and narrow path, but he didn't say it didn't have any bumps. He didn't say it didn't have any potholes. He didn't say there weren't any obstacles in the road that we're going to have to overcome. And remember, these are a part of what can be classified as our tests and trials that help to build our character. Yahweh wants to see, how are you going to get through that? Are you going to put to work the laws that I've given you and that I've shown you to help you to overcome that obstacle so that you can develop the character that I want you to develop, so that you can be the man or the woman that I have said that you will be, and you can handle the responsibility of governing the entire universe. Anybody in here ever govern the universe? No? Okay. A planet? No. Do you think that you can? Oh, I hear a little doubt there. Well, you should think you can, because Yahweh said you can. All right? Yahweh said you can. Well, anyway, here, Pastor said, he says, you're the start of this, the house of Yahweh in these last days. There is no other after this seventh light. The seventh light is 1074. And of course, you can just write down for your notes in Romans chapter 8, verse 18 through 21, which talks about our job. And of course, Hebrews 11, 39 through 40 and 12:1, which talks about, our coming, our revealing and so forth in this time period. But just in closing, hold fast, brothers and sisters, endure, because Yahweh has his bets on you, on this work in this house. So, as the saying goes, if you bet against the house, you lose. But if you are in unity with the house in Yahweh, then you are guaranteed a place in this eternal kingdom and a job forevermore. May Yahweh bless your understanding. If you all please stand. I'd like to turn it over to the great Kohan Yeshua.
Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. All right, if we will be opening up our books of Yahweh. 1 Yochanan chapter 4. 1 Yochanan chapter 4 and verse 15 through 18. This is on page 966. The title of my sermon is Keep Yourself from the Defilement of Gods. And how are we going to do that? By using perfect love, because perfect love casts out all fear. Now, I know we think that we know what this means, but do we truly know what it means? Do we truly believe what this means? In 1 Yochanan chapter 4, verses 15 through 18, and we're going to go back here a lot. This is going to be our main subject right here. Look at verse 15. Whoever confesses that Yeshua is the Son of Yahweh, Yahweh dwells in him, and he in Yahweh. And we have known and believed the love that Yahweh has for us. Yahweh is love. And he who dwells in love dwells in Yahweh, and Yahweh in him. Now, if you take this as a Christian takes it, you're not going to achieve much out of what this actually is telling us. You have to take it here a little and there a little and take everything that we've been taught by Yahweh's last days anointed witness and put it together. In verse 17, it says, in this our love is made perfect, that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we to become in this world. Right? To be made perfect. All right? This word perfect. We all know what it means, right? Let's see here. This is out of Merriam-Webster's right here. All right? The first definition means being entirely without fault, defect, flawless, a perfect diamond. All right? That's kind of hard to achieve quickly. All right? That's kind of hard to achieve considering that we're not even a diamond in the rough yet. We're not even the dirt that was around the diamond when it was discovered. All right? We're still coming out of this world. We're still trying to learn how to adjust everything that we've been taught since we were young children that was entirely God worship. We're learning to take that and push it to the side and adopt the doctrines, adopt what we're being taught by Yahweh's house and put it to use within our lives. But let's keep reading. Satisfying all requirements. Okay, accurate, right? All right, now we're starting to see here. Corresponding to an ideal standard or abstract concept. Okay, now I'm starting to see what it's telling me, how I need to become perfect, because there's certain standards in order for me to become perfect, just like Yahweh. There's certain standards I have to achieve in Yahweh's house. But remember the words that Pastor told us. We have a job. And it's not to improve on what Yahweh created, but it was to do what? Look here. Faithfully reproducing the original. To become perfect means you are faithfully reproducing the original. So, perfect love, the original love that was once delivered all to the saints, cast out all fear. All right. Well, how can you achieve that? All right, we're not going to turn there, but please write it down. Exodus chapter 25 and verse 40. Exodus chapter 25 and verse 40. Now, this is speaking of the 7-lamp lampstand. All right, the 7-lamp lampstand represents what? The 7 works, the 7 arrows of Yahweh's house. Now, in Exodus chapter 25 and verse 40, Moshe was instructed to make sure that them, was made according to the pattern. Speaking of the 7-lamp lampstand. It just wasn't speaking of a physical lampstand standing there. But the 7 works that was in the beginning in Yahweh's plan had to be done, had to be made, had to be created into Yahweh's image according to a pattern that was established. It had to be done according to that pattern, because outside of the pattern, Yahweh's plan would fail. All right, let's look over here to Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 5. Hold your hand there in 1 Yahaqob, because we're going to be going back. I'll try to do the same thing. Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 5. Now we're talking about perfect love. All right? We know what the definition of love is, and we're going to cover that. It was covered, almost all the speakers covered it today. Last week, the future priest that was speaking covered what perfect love, or covered what love is. But we're told perfect love. Not just love. All right? Keeping the law of Yahweh, that's love. But we're told we have to have perfect love to cast out all fear. All right? Well, what's fear? In Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verse 5, look at verse 5. He says, and you must love Yahweh your Father with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. Who taught us that? Yeshua. Yeshua Messiah told us what? This is the greatest commandment of all commandments. To love Yahweh your Father. All right? Well, you have to have perfect love. You just don't keep the laws of Yahweh. It has to become perfect. In order to cast out fear, it has to become perfect. Look over to the side note. Right? Side note, R1 and D. We're going to read both of these. And highlight this, underline it, circle it, make this stand out to where you remember what this is telling us. Remember, and you must love Yahweh your Father. R1, the side note, says, fulfill Yahweh's laws out of love. For one who acts out of love is not like him, is on a higher plane than one. They don't act like a God. Who acts out of fear. Right? Someone who acts out of fear acts like a God. Also watch what else occurs to someone who keeps the law out of fear. All right? Why are we here? To escape nuclear holocaust? If that's the only reason we're here and we don't see those nuclear bombs go off, we're going to leave. We have to be here for different reasons. He who serves his ruler out of fear, he who comes here, sits at the feet of the witness and does it out of fear. If his ruler excessively troubles him, if we become frustrated with the tests and the trials that we're going to be presented with day after day, with our fellow brothers, our workers, our supervisors, the priest, anyone around us, when we become frustrated, if we do it out of fear, he will leave his ruler and go away. That's the difference. That's the difference that we have to have, and that's why our love has to be perfect. Because if we're doing it out of fear, and we have to understand what fear is, and we're going to cover that. And D, it says, this is the first of the 2 greatest commandments of all. The second is, you shall love your brother as yourself. Leviticus 19:18. On these 2 commandments is set all the law and the prophets. And that was Matthew chapter 22. And let's turn there right now. Let's read the words that Yeshua taught. Because you have to understand, Yeshua never taught anything on his own. He never came up with ideas and said, well, this is it. Everything Yeshua taught was directly from the laws and the prophets. Matthew chapter 22. And everything we teach has to be taught directly according to the words of the witness. Because if we try to interpret these things on our own, and we try to add to it, and try to put our great wisdom on it, we're going to fail. Because we're not having that perfect love. Matthew chapter 22. In verse 35, this is on page 750. Well, look at verse 34. He says, but when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they came together. Ooh, this was a challenge. All right? The witness. We see the same thing in these last days. Things coming together. People challenging the house of Yahweh. How can we trap this person? How can we trip them up? And one of them, a lawyer, that is an expert in the law of Yahweh, asked him a question to test him, saying, all right, now look at this. Whenever a pastor gives a sermon, I want to show you what I do, because I'm pretty simple-minded. So I try to make it easy to where I can remember what pastor said. Right? So here, this word lawyer, I always write OYH. So that tells me Overseer Yisrayl Hawkins spoke on this date, 9/29/2012, and he said that word lawyer meant mason. All right? So that goes right along with what the great Khan was covering earlier. All right? And they asked him a question to try to test him. Now this was trying to trap him, pastor said on that date also. Teacher, what is the greatest commandment in the law? And Yeshua said to him, you must love Yahweh your Father with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. A direct quote directly from the law of Yahweh. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your brother as yourself. On these two commandments hang and depend all the laws and the prophets. Everything. The complete plan of Yahweh hangs on those two laws. Right? When you build on top of something, it becomes foundational. So this is a foundation piece right here. To love Yahweh and to love each other. And when it says love your brother, right? That's the called out ones. When it says word brother, that's the called out ones of Yahweh's house. It's not speaking of worldly. It's not speaking of worldly family or those who have left us, right? You have to understand, there's a saying in the world that blood is thicker than water, and you can drown in both. You can choke on your own blood and never recover from it. The water that binds us together, as the great Khan covered last week, we're born, begotten into the family name of Yahweh. That's stronger than any blood. There is no blood that can divide the unity that comes forth from the true love that we're brought together in Yahweh's house. That must come first. That's true love. That's perfect love. All right, be turning over back to 1 Yochanan. 1 Yochanan chapter 4, and let's look at verse 18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, for fear has torment. He who fears is not made perfect in love. He who fears. All right? So let's cover what the word fear means. All right, we all think we know what fear means, right? We do. But let's let Scripture tell us what fear means. All right, this is the definition for the word fear. It's an unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. Right, now, there's different ways of learning. All right, there's called avoidance training, to where I can inflict fear upon someone and make them do what they're supposed to do out of fear of being corrected. That's not what Yahweh does. Yahweh gives us laws. He said He gave us laws, and He says, I would that you would do this. I'm just warning you what's going to take place when you don't do this. Not forcing you through fear. It's teaching us. It's educating us, making sure that we learn how to make the proper choice. Perfect love casts out fear. Look at the next definition. Anxious concern. All right, automatically Scripture should be popping up into our head, and we should be focusing in on all those testimonies of the prophets and all the witnesses or the apostles and what Yeshua told us. All these things should be popping in our minds, because that's what our minds should be focused on, achieving this perfect love. All right, turn over to Philippians. Philippians chapter 4. This is found on page 923. Philippians chapter 4, starting in verse 4. It says, rejoice in Yahweh always. Again, I say rejoice. Right? Don't forget that word always. Right? That's a requirement. Through our tests, through our trials, through the great times we have, when we cry out to Yahweh, rejoice. Let your moderation be known to all men. Yahweh is at hand. All right, remember, we're standing on the sea of glass right now. We've been on the sea of glass this entire time. We're standing in judgment. We are being tested and tried to see if we can achieve the goals that Yahweh has before us. In verse 6, be anxious about nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to Yahweh. Don't be anxious. Don't fear. Don't have these things weighing us down. And the peace of Yahweh, in verse 7, and the peace of Yahweh, which surpasses all understanding, will keep your hearts and minds through Yeshua Messiah. All right? Now we're starting to see what we're learning here. Perfect love casts out all fear. Well, once we focus on these things, now we're starting to learn how we can actually guard ourselves from falling away from Yahweh's house. In verse 8, finally, brothers, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are righteous report, if there is any virtue, and if there is any praise, think on these things. Focus. Keep our minds on there. All of a sudden, all these scriptures should be pouring in. Everything we've been taught by the witness. If our minds are focused on these things, everything should be coming together right now. The things which you learned and received and heard and saw in me, do these, and the peace of Yahweh will be with you. Why do we have fear? Well, because we're not doing the things we've been instructed to do. Right? We still think that I'm a big man. I can go do what I think I should do. I know I'm told to do this, but I don't see that written in the law of Yahweh. Focus. Pay attention to what we've been instructed, and we will see these things written before our very eyes. We're turning over to Matthew chapter 6. So we're going to see that the apostles were in complete unity with Yeshua Messiah and what he taught. Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6 and verse 25. And this is found on page 733. Therefore I say to you, do not be anxiously concerned about your life. All right? Remember what the word fear means. Anxious. All right? Don't fear these things. Don't be anxiously concerned about your life, of what you will eat or what you will drink, nor even about your body, what you are going to wear. Is not the life more than food, and the body more than clothing? Behold, the birds of the air, for they do not sow, neither do they reap, nor gather into storehouses, yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Do we truly believe this? Do we truly believe the value that we have before Yahweh's eyes? If we don't, we're never going to achieve the goals that's set before us. Young men, we need to wake up. The value that Yahweh places on you is irreplaceable. What the world has to offer is nothing. Not even a portion. You can't even think it compares to what Yahweh is offering us right now. Focus on these things and get this foolishness out of our lives. Which of you, by anxiously worrying, can add 1 cubit to his stature? And why worry about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field and how they grow. They neither toil nor spin. And yet I say you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Now if Yahweh so clothes the grass of the field, which living today is used as fuel for the ovens tomorrow, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? This isn't just talking about physical stuff. Remember, there's a certain garment that we have to put on. And he's given us everything that we need right now to put on that garment of humility. Everything. We just have to trust it. For the Gentiles anxiously worry about these things in verse 32. And your heavenly Father knows that you need them. Yahweh knows what we have need of. We just have to put our trust into Yahweh. And how do we do this? In verse 33, but you, instead of doing all these other things, instead of allowing fear to overtake us, instead of anxiously worrying about all these things that the world worries about, but you seek first the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness. And his righteousness. Seek the kingdom of Yahweh and his righteousness. And all these things will be added to you. Therefore, do not anxiously worry about what tomorrow may hold, for tomorrow will have worries of its own. Each day has enough of its own trouble. All right? Seek the kingdom of Yahweh first. All right? What scripture should pop into our mind? It should be Deuteronomy chapter 12 and verse 5, Isaiah 2:2, Isaiah 24:14, all these different things. Going to the priest, doing what the priest explains to us, instructs us to do in Deuteronomy chapter 17 and verse 10. Our mind should be focused on these things, so when we become frustrated or we allow fear to overtake us, the perfect love cast it out. We're able to deal with those negative thoughts before they grow into the bitterness that separates us from Yahweh. All right, be turning back to 1 Yahaqob chapter 4. 1 Yahaqob chapter 4. In verse 19, we love him because he first loved us. And in verse 20, if anyone says, I love Yahweh and hates his brother, is a liar. For he who does not love his brother whom he has seen, how can he love Yahweh whom he has seen? For we have this commandment. What? They're teaching from the law again. Imagine that. We have this commandment from him. No, it's not one of the 10. It's one of the 613. That he who loves Yahweh must love his brother also. How do we love one another? Keep the laws towards one another? Yes. Let's go into further detail. Leviticus chapter 19. Let's see what this true love, this perfect love is. Leviticus 19, this is found on page 98. Let's start in verse 17. Actually, let's start in verse 16. Let's get to the root of the issue here. In verse 16, it says, you shall not go about talebearing or slandering among your people. Do not do anything that endangers your brother's life. I am Yahweh. So that's a warning right there. Begging us, please. If you love Yahweh, you cannot do these things. You shall not hate your brother in verse 17, or your sister in your heart. You shall not do this, but this is what you shall do. Rebuke your brother or your sister frankly, so that you will not share in his or her guilt. What is true love? When you see someone not following the perfect love, when you see someone going astray, when you see someone making choices that's not going to have a very fruitful outcome, we, members in Yahweh's house, we, ordained for a position, being trained as teachers, have to be the ones to point it out. Put on that cloak of humility and say, okay, we need to work on this. Doesn't mean I have to be perfect. Get that. I don't have to be perfect in order to help you get perfection. But what we have to do is we have to help each other get to that point to where we are perfect. It's a unified system. Without the unity that Yahweh wants us to have, we're not going to become perfect. We're going to fail. But we have to do this together. And in verse 18, do not seek revenge nor bear a grudge against one of your own people, but you shall love your brother or your sister as yourself. I am Yahweh. That's the second greatest commandment of all. How can you achieve these things with fear? You can't. Because when we become anxiously concerned about the things around us or what the world has to offer us, and we start to doubt, when the tests and the trials come, we turn. We walk away. Be turning over to Yahaqob chapter 15 on page 832. Yahaqob chapter 15. Start in verse 9. Just as the Father loved me, so I have loved you. Continue in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, and just as I have kept my Father's laws and abide in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy might remain in you, and that your joy might be complete. This is my commandment, love one another as I have loved you. All right, so there's Yeshua talking about this, and he laid hold of this. All right, he said, this is my commandment. All right, this is what's going to get us through this in the end. This is my commandment, love one another as I have loved you. And that love is unconditional. It's an unconditional love. Greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life on behalf of his brothers. No greater love. So when we're talking about this perfect love, Yeshua said no man has a greater love than this right here, to lay down your life. That means to put down your own desires, to serve everyone else without hypocrisy. This is what laying down your life means. Doesn't mean I have to take a bullet for you. That's not what love is. Love is taking away from yourself, taking away from those desires that the world is pushing towards you every day, and saying, get behind me, Satan. There's a work to do. True love is telling those that leave us, that don't want to be a part of this work. I've got so many people that are here choosing to be a part of this work, that want to be a part of Yahweh's house. I have to dedicate my time to them. If you want my time, You need to be back here at Abel. If you're not here at Abel, then there's no unity we have. Because my life has to be laid down for the called out ones of Yahweh. And that has to be the first thing in our lives. Right. Genesis chapter 4, verses 3 through 8. We're not going to read through this, but we're going to see what we're compare. All right. We saw the beautiful words here and everything that were being taught by Yeshua, but then we saw Cain. All right. Cain didn't have this great love. All right. He feared. All right. He thought he could bring forth his own ideas. He thought he could bring forth his own offerings, his own people, his own mixture of righteousness and evil, and Yahweh didn't accept it. But listen to what Yeshua says right here in Yochanan 15 and verse 14. He says, "You are my brothers." But what does he say next? "If you do whatever I command you." You are my brothers if you do what I command you. We are the seed of Yisrayl Hawkins only if we do as he commands us. No longer do I call you servants. Now, right here, you should be writing down Proverbs 17, 1 through 3. All right? Because Proverbs speaks of this right here, and it tells us that a servant becomes a son through tests and trials. Only through tests and trials. And how does he do that? Proverbs says in verse 17, verse 3, Yahweh tests the minds of men. He allows us to be tested to prove that we can become brothers, sons of Yahweh. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his ruler is doing. But I have called you brothers, because everything that I heard from my Father I have made known to you. You have not chosen me, but I have chosen you and ordained you that you should go and produce fruit. All right, right now Scripture should be popping into our minds. I'm the vine, you are the branches, all these things bringing forth fruit. What did Cain bring forth? Fruits of the ground, which was not acceptable. What kind of fruit should we be bringing forth in order to be a brother of Yeshua Messiah? And that your fruit should remain. Not only are we going to be bringing forth fruit, but the fruit that we bring forth through perfect love is going to remain. It's not going to leave. And that your fruit should remain, so whatever you ask of the Father in my name, he may give it to you. These things I command you, so that you may love one another. How do you love one another? By doing everything that we're instructed to do. That shows true love. That's perfect love. And not done because I'm afraid of the consequences. It's done because I look at the blessings, the instructions I'm giving. I'm told to do this. Start looking at the beauty in it. Start looking at the results that's going to come forth from actually accomplishing something. Start looking at the love we show when we're told, don't do this. Don't look at the consequences. If I go out in the world and do this, I'm going to receive this disease or get this. Start looking at the beauty. If I don't do that, but I stay here and do my job, and I put the work of Yahweh first, start looking at the beauty, the perfect love that Yahweh's trying to create within us. Then all that fear of what the world has to offer us, all the anxious worrying we have, disappears. We kill it. We destroy it. The old man is put down. 1 Yochanan chapter 5. 1 Yochanan chapter 5 and verse 1. Whoever believes that Yeshua is the Messiah is begotten of Yahweh. Yeshua said, he who believes in me is doing exactly as I'm telling you to do. What I'm doing here today, you're going to be doing the same thing. Is begotten of Yahweh. And everyone who loves him who begot also loves him who is begotten by him or of him. By this we know that we love the children of Yahweh when we love Yahweh by keeping his laws. For this love is the love of Yahweh, that we keep his law, and his law is not grievous. All right? The law is not grievous. Real fast, last thing. The word grievous. How many times have you heard this said? The house of Yahweh is oppressive. That's fear. When we keep the laws out of fear, we no longer look at the beauty inside Yahweh's laws. We look at it as being oppressive to us because we still have the desire to do what? To sin. We have to examine ourselves thoroughly, and we have to subject ourselves to everything that house Yahweh brings forth in order to become perfect, just like Yahweh is perfect. If you'll please stand, I'll turn it over to the closing prayer. Or